Now to Detroit, where the trustees of the Ford Foundation are meeting for the first time in almost 70 years. It was founded by Edsel Ford, but the group moved to New York City back in 1946. Well, last year, the Ford Foundation shipped in $125 million to the Grand Bargain, which was instrumental in the bankruptcy deal. Foundation President Darren Walker says the group is, quote, all in on Detroit. He spoke at the Mackinac Policy Conference about the city's future.
We are in the business of hope at the Ford Foundation, and so there is no place in America to be more hopeful about than the city of Detroit. Right. It is, in so many ways, positioned for a great future. All of the admonition and advice that these bright men have put forward, I completely endorse. But I also know that at the end of the day, everybody wants Detroit to succeed. Yeah. America wants Detroit to succeed. Yeah. You can feel it. And Detroit is going to succeed.
So perhaps the larger question now is, what role does philanthropy play in the city's comeback? But I do want to talk about the Ford Foundation. Let me start with you, Stephen, because I know that you were at several events this week that they were at, and it was a series of events that and meetings that they appeared in all over the city. How has the Ford Foundation's, I guess, goals and parameters changed in taking on Detroit's story and Detroit's comeback?
Well, it's part of, Darren Walker, the CEO, wrote a pretty important letter a week or two ago about what the mission of that foundation should be and what the mission of philanthropy should be, and he really focused on the growing sort of inequality that we have in America, the growing economic inequality that we see, and I think there's no question that Detroit fits nicely into that category. I mean, it's the poorest big city in America. Its government was just bankrupt and is now getting back on its feet. I think you can expect to see the Ford Foundation, which for a really long time has had very little to do with Detroit and Michigan. I think you can expect to see a real significant investment. Now, what does that look like? I don't think any of us quite knows yet, but they were asking a lot of questions about the future here and what role philanthropy ought to be playing in it. There's a tension between the idea that philanthropy should step in where government has had to step back. Is that the right role for them? Is that a sustainable role? But no matter what they decide, I think the commitment is going to be huge.
So what role should philanthropy play?
Well, I mean, clearly it should fill the gaps, and it should be taking care, particularly on the social side of things, the areas where government can no longer sustain its efforts. I mean, government got into a lot of charitable work that should be done by these private foundations, but the significance of Ford is Ford and Kresge, which were both significant in the bailout last year, they're leading foundations. So if they write a check, if they write a big check, they can bring other smaller foundations along with them, and that's a lot then of critical mass behind this effort of supporting Detroit. And I think Walker recognizes the roots of this foundation and sort of its historic attachment and obligation to Detroit, and it's good to see them re-engage.
So you talk about plugging the holes that maybe the government can't quite fill. So does that mean anything about policing budgets? I mean, what are we talking about?
Historically, they have all foundations have really hesitated to do that because, as they say, we're not here to play the role that government should be playing. If there's a government service that government can't offer anymore, they don't want to be stepping in and saying, well, we're going to pay for police officers and things like that. I think what they will start to look at, I think in Detroit, the opportunity is looking at the population that we have and the needs that they have, which are really profound. Still, after the bankruptcy, of course, didn't address the lack of educational opportunities, the lack of job training, the sort of cultural isolation that people in the city are experiencing right now. I would expect philanthropy to step very heavily into those issues.
Well, I think they're looking at, they're not going to pay for basic services, but they're looking at where their money can sort of be a catalyst, where they can step in perhaps in the area of economic development. The M-Run Rail is a perfect example. If we put a little money in this, will it sort of spawn other money and private investment and what have you. Where can they invest that will have a ripple effect, an escalating effect, to improve the quality of life of a community? And I think they're prepared to be very creative. It's no longer just about, well, we're going to write a check to this museum or to this organization. They really want to see their money invested in a way that delivers a big return in terms of quality of life.
The attention is good, the presence is good. What are potential pitfalls here? Any?
Well, I mean, I think again, you are substituting money into a community that hasn't had it from the outside. Well, the question I always have is, how long will this attention last, right? Will we get used to the support that we're getting from the philanthropic sector, just as they decide, well, you're not the interesting, shiny new object anymore, and we've got to go do something
And that's
else.
why it can't be to sustain services. But the greater risk here is whether the board members of these foundations will get comfortable with the level of risk that this new mission involves, because they're really acting in many ways as venture capital funds. They're investing money in different ways in ventures that may not take off, and their money may sort of be lost. Just like private venture funds, it happens there. And are these board members comfortable with that sort of high risk investment, the sort of thing it takes to make a real difference in a city like Detroit?